I finally collected enough parts to put this Jeep on its own weight. What we have here is the R-Tech lower spring purchase. The original front springs from this Jeep. This is from Clayton, made for a Jeep XJ to go Frenched into the outside of the frame. I'm gonna do mine a little bit different because we're working with the truck version of the XJ and I have to do this a little bit different, but it's something that I'm really excited about. So if you come in here, you can see that between the frame and the tire, I only have about 2 inches of room, and this isn't even at full bump yet. In fact, when this tire goes all the way up to the bump stop, the inside of the tire is probably going to hit the inside of the fender well, which is flush with this frame. Now, because these Clayton off-road brackets are meant to go this way on the outside of an XJ frame, these would usually sit right about there. But because my frame is my uniframe is about 3 inches wide, and this edge is supposed to go right up to the outside of the frame, that means this would be sitting way out here like this, and this would be contacting the tire when it comes up. So this part, which would be down here in this area, would contact the tire way before I get full stuff. So what I have elected to do is spin these around the other way and mount them to the inside of my frame. Taking a look at these Clayton brackets, they're actually pretty cool. It's 3/16 steel, folded and welded into a box shape that houses a front spring, meant to go on the rear of a Jeep XJ. He sent me the hardware to mount these Delrin bump stops. Now what's cool about these bump stops is they work as bump stops, but they also hold the spring in. So you could tell they don't really fit through the top of this. So this would be sitting on the inside, and when the spring comes down off of this bracket, this Delrin piece should hold them and keep them from falling out. Also included with that kit, which is pretty decently priced by the way, is the rubber isolators that go on top of the spring. Of course, keep in mind that all this is upside down, right? This one's a little trickier of a puzzle. It's got 2 different size slots, so it's pretty easy to figure out where these go. Just slide those in there. That one goes in there. We also have this piece that holds these two together. I'm not exactly sure what to call this piece. I think I'm just going to call it a spring cup from now on, and I'm not sure exactly what orientation it's supposed to be. So I think what I'll do is I'll tack that in last after I have this whole thing welded up. I have found it's difficult to write with a Sharpie marker or soapstone over metal that's got old paint and dirt all over it. So I went and bought some sidewalk chalk, and it seems to make some pretty good marks for, general area. And you can go scratch with a scratch all for something precision. I would have loved to get rid of this half of frame cross support, but after I make the cuts that I need to for these upper spring mounts, this is going to be the only thing holding this tail end of the frame from getting all wobbly. This is where things are going to get a little more technical, because locating where you want this spring mount to be, since this axle is at right height, if you put it right on top, let's say you want this spring mount to be right there, and that would be the center line, and when the axle flexes out, it may be clear over here and bend your spring over. So you want to calculate how much up travel and down travel you have, and then replicate that before you weld in your upper spring mount. You can see that my lower link is hitting the old leaf spring bracket. It's another at least 2 or 3 inches that I can come up with this. I want to be able to see the full travel with this before I make any decisions. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that sucker off. Of course, you should always think about safety first, and I want you to do that. It's an important thing to do. But you should also think about courtesy. It's about 8:45 where I'm from, and everybody in my neighborhood is pretty much awake. You wouldn't want to be grinding and cutting things at 5 in the morning. See, now that's a whole lot better. I've maxed out my jack with the piece of wood on it. That may just be about high enough. It's going to be about 8 inches to the bottom of that piece of Delrin. About 8 inches from where that's going to be mounted. Got about a 2-inch gap there. I could put a couple of hockey pucks on the lower spring mount, and that'll be perfect. I flip my plumb bob to the other side of this frame here, and it's sitting right about at the middle of that tube, and I'm going to mark that on this piece of the frame right where that string is sitting. I'm going to drop this down as low as it's supposed to be and mark it again. So I'm back with the plumb bob, and it's sitting right in the middle of the tube, and here was the mark before, and the new mark is about an inch in front of that, 1 3/8 inches. I want to measure this center line so that when I do the same thing on the other side, it's exactly the same. So that's 33 7/8 is where that line is. And I'll mark it on the other side, and I'll also write the measurement. This upper mount is exactly 6.5 inches long. So if I go to this center line and I measure out each side 3 1/4 inches, it should be dead center with this upper mount. It's worth noting that if you're going to measure something that has a grade or a slope like this, to give yourself a reference. Now, this square tubing represents where the bottom of the bed is going to be, and I want these lower mounts to mount flush with the bottom of the bed, given about 1 inch or 1/2 inch probably. I've got this measured out at 6.5 inches, and the first thing I'm going to do is cut this upper lip off and cut off this upper shock absorber mount. Okay, now that that nightmare is over, that piece can go in there. I actually have a piece of 1/2 inch bar stock, and I'm going to set this between the upper mount and this reference point, and then I don't have to measure it. Well, we got lucky because this upper spring mount, mounted parallel with the bottom of the bed, ends up being pointing directly toward the axle tube. So I'm going to go ahead and mark it, and we'll start cutting out the frame. I like to mark everywhere I'm going to grind with a piece of chalk. That's way when the chalk off of the frame, I'll know that I've grinded it. Now that we got this all tacked in, I'm going to clean off the welds and weld it the rest of the way up. I found some 3.5 inch angle iron. Just going to finish off wrenching this the rest of the way in. I'll get this all welded up, and then we'll trim the bottom off to be flush with the bottom of the frame. Okay, so I have this all welded in. You can kind of see the idea I was going for with the angle iron, extending this whole box. I think it turned out pretty good. I'll take the spring, I set that right about where the lower is going to be. Look at it from here, it kind of swings inward from the frame, so there's no binding or anything. And here it is with the coil spring installed. There's the top, I don't have the retainer on there, and here's the bottom. I had to clearance out a lot on the lower control arm mount. I did do some reading, and this is how the coil spring retained down to the bottom. That's the only information that I could find. I'm not sure. I suppose the more you turn it, the more pressure you have pushing down on the spring. But I'll have to do a little more reading and I'll figure that out. Well, there she sits. I don't think that we did too bad. That's how you put a front spring on the rear of a Jeep Comanche. Thanks for watching Black and Blue Garage. If you haven't already, press the like button for me. Now I gotta go put the other spring mounts in. See you next time.